Minister in the Presidency, Javani, is adamant that government is not in a financial crisis. She was speaking during a post-cabinet briefing last week. Javani pointed out that South Africa's economic challenges should not be treated as isolated. Now, Peter Bruce is a Sunday Times columnist, and he's written an opinion piece reflecting on Javani's remarks. He joins us now for a discussion. A very good morning to you, Peter. Thank you for your time. I mean, we've just listened into Tshwane Mayor Cilliers Brink exploring options to become independent from Eskom, talking about how it's important to look at other options and ensure that they are independent as a city from Eskom. On the other end, we know that Minister Javani was responding to questions around load shedding, reacting to load shedding, saying that it's all temporary and that government's got it under control. And just as she said that, Eskom itself publishing this daunting 12-month forecast on how things are not going to get better anytime soon. What's your take? What do you make of Javani's remarks?
Well, as I tried to put in my column, she's obviously got to say what she's saying, but it's not true. Eskom is simply unable to back up what she claims is going to happen. And so as if you saw the graphic that I think you saw, it basically stipulates week for week. So Eskom divides the year up into week 1, 2, 3, right through to 53, and it will tell you, on week 32, we'll expect to use this much electricity, this much will be down, this much will be down for planned maintenance, etc., etc. And its expectation for every single week, without fail, between now and the same time next year, is that it will be in an emergency situation. In other words, it'll be code red, and we will be load shedding. Now, that's Eskom. By all means, go and fire the guy who did the chart, and then maybe the chart will go away. But if politicians like Mpho and Javani really genuinely believe what they're saying, good luck to them. I think the rest of us in South Africa have to get on with, have to live in the real world and plan for what Eskom says is going to happen.
Yeah. In your article, you say that President Cyril Ramaphosa loves Javani, no matter how feckless she constantly reveals herself to be.
He keeps promoting her. She was absolutely hopeless at small business, worse at communications. And now she's the minister in the presidency, nominally in charge of the intelligence services, and has partly played a hand in producing legislation that'll potentially, unless the courts intervene, potentially make it extremely difficult to criticize the government, extremely difficult for NGOs to operate and help people that are the victims of poor government services, like those people who died in the fire in Joburg the other week. These NGOs play an enormously important role, both socially and environmentally. And sometimes they are funded from overseas. These big foreign funds like Greenpeace or whatever they may be, they do collect money abroad, and this will severely curtail their ability to do so. And also, this bill proposes to decide whether you are a security risk or not. If you want to start an NGO, and it can say no.
Yeah.
What it means ultimately, though, is that you and I will one day face that kind of action from a government now that's getting increasingly paranoid, as it fails to deal with the very complex problems that we face. It keeps bringing the same solutions to the same problems, which is, the definition of madness. And we as journalists had better watch out for our freedoms, because they'll come for us too.
Yeah. Another important aspect that you raise, which of course has continued to make headlines. We just looking at the papers, some of the papers yesterday, the Sunday papers, speaking about pensioners, beneficiaries of SASSA, who are about 100,000 of them are still even today, as you and I speak, waiting to be paid by SASSA. You speak about how she's hastened the demise of setting up the Post Bank. Of course, losing its entire board just a few days ago. Talk to us about that.
Well, it was this government that decided to separate the Post Bank and the Post Office, which is the reason that Mark Barnes resigned from the Post Office, because it only makes sense with the two together, to him anyway. And, in order to be able to provide social services and finance to the masses and millions of people who need it, you need a fully functioning post office with branches and reach, and so that you can have access to people. Anyway, they've split it up. They've got now had to find extra boards for the post office and for the Post Bank, and they're looking to try and license the Post Bank. And clearly the Post Bank, which is supposed to be the new big state bank for the country that the ANC has been going on about for years, is a disaster. And it can't pay even people whose names and addresses it has. How it's going to function as a bank in a commercial setting, I have no idea. And those poor people, just imagine not getting your money. You need that 300 rand. You just need it so badly, and it doesn't come. And it doesn't come because the government doesn't do its bloody job properly.
And the other thing here is looking at the article that what Javani said was that they don't want to create the impression that there's a crisis and South Africa is going to collapse. South Africa is not going to collapse. We have everything on hand. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that statement. What is the concern here?
Well, I mean, so, sure, I don't think that we are going to collapse. We are in a crisis. We're in a much more serious crisis than she seems to believe. Their plan with Eskom is a classic. So here you go. The plan with Eskom basically rests on the units at Kusile coming back into action at the end of the year. I don't know if you've been following this thing. So there are 3 units, four units down at Kusile, and a 5th hasn't yet been commissioned. The 3 units that are down will be because they all joined into the same chimney stack that got overloaded with very damp ash and collapsed. So they've now built separate chimneys for these 3 units at Kusile, and they are due to come back at various stages during the end of the year. And the fifth unit, which is down, is due to come back, I think, in September. But all of these things, what they don't tell you is that they don't come back at the full rated power that they were originally supposed to. They come back in a very, very careful and measured and kind of scary kind of a way. Because, for instance, the one that's down and due to come back in September, it doesn't just suddenly start producing power. It gets slowly synchronized to the grid. It'll take 6 months before, if it comes back in September, it'll be next April or May before it produces at its full power, if nothing goes wrong, and a lot goes wrong at Eskom, as we know, all the time.
Yeah.
The three units that went down because of the ash buildup in the chimney, they're not going to come back at their full rated power either. They can't. Eskom can't take that risk. So they'll come back at half of it. And even then, they'll be at a percentage of the half. So, while they are arguing, and I saw it in the paper somewhere today, they're saying, 4 stages of load shedding once we've got Kusile back on track. That's just nonsense. And, it'll come back, it'll be slightly better, but, you'll still have load shedding. We'll still be in load shedding this time next year, I'll guarantee you. I'll put my house on it.
Yeah.
And it'll be bad load shedding. These people, the politicians don't know what they're talking about. They get told things by people who are scared to tell them the truth, and they repeat it.
Yeah.
And Eskom did us all a favor by producing those forecasts and those assumptions that it's going to work on for next year, because at least we know from them.
Looking at next year, next year is a big year in terms of elections, and with some level of spin doctoring or perhaps a misunderstanding of the reality at Eskom, how imperative do you think the Eskom issue, the load shedding factor will be as, voters consider who to vote for next year?
Well, what is unstoppable at Eskom, what seems to be unstoppable, and this has been the case since we started paying attention to this thing in 2007 or in 2008 after the first time, Eskom's energy availability factor, which we all know about now, is going down. There is no way of stopping it. There are 90 units in all, or 83 it's a big number of units in Eskom. And they are slowly getting older, less efficient, and producing less electricity. Yes, some of them probably may get retired before they're completely exhausted, but none of them can operate the way they were when they were new. So the EAF constantly falls, and the only way to counter that is to find some other way of generating energy and getting it onto the grid that we can use. And obviously that's renewable energy, but we don't have the grid to put it on.
Yeah.
You cannot, as the government keeps on trying to insist it can, you cannot turn the Eskom generation performance around. It can't be done. It might, it may well happen briefly for a week or here and a week there, but the average performance of Eskom's power stations will be downward, as it has been for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to change it now.
Very well. Thank you so much. Thanks for weighing in and talking to us there as you reflect on Javani's speech in your opinion piece. Speaking there to Peter Bruce, who's a Sunday Times columnist, speaking about the no crisis, says Javani, and pass the Kool-Aid is the name of that article.